Welcome to our LAC Graph, October 14th, Immersion at Scale. How location-based entertainment fits in the extended reality market. I am Evelyn Harper, the chair of LAACM CGRAPH, which stands for Los Angeles Association for Computing Machinery, Special Interest Group on Computer Graphics, Professional Chapter. Let me introduce LAC Graph's Vice Chair, Moderator, and Producer, Larry Rosenthal.
Thanks, Evelyn.
My pleasure, thank you.
Thank you. So everyone, welcome to another LAC Graphs Presents. Today we have a great speaker, interesting topic, and hopefully at the end we'll go into a virtual LAC Graph ACM space to hang out a bit if people would like to, which will, it's optional, but everybody can get to do it. I'll give you instructions for that in a few minutes. So I'm Larry Rosenthal, the Vice Chair of LAC Graph. Cube XR has been my company name for 30 some odd years. I've always been involved in XR and VR and 3D design. So tonight, again, immersion at scale, where location-based entertainment fits into the XR market. And we have a presenter, Bob Cooney, who's the executive director of Lexra.org. And Bob probably has been around as long as anybody in this field. So he's a great presenter to have. He probably knows more about the location-based XR world than anybody who I know. And so there's Bob. And what I'll do is I'll turn over the presentation to Bob, let him give about a 30-minute presentation. Then him and I will basically just chat with some questions for about 30 minutes. And then we'll have time for about a 10-15-minute Q&A. So if there are questions and answers, put that into the questions and answer panel on the interface, and we'll ask them all at the end. And then I say about if we're lucky, about 8:15, 8:20, whatever, will pop into the RP1 world. So the way that you get into the 3D chat, there are instructions on the side. You'll see that in the webinar chat panel. You'll go to rp1.com website, launch the website. It'll ask you to join as a guest or a member. You can join as a guest, put your name in, click the button. You'll be basically transported into a virtual world. And then you'll see on the upper far left corner a pin icon, like for maps, Google Maps. Click on that pin icon, scroll it down a bit, and you'll see the LAACM CGRAPH VR campus. And then go to that location, and that's where the avatars will be. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Bob, and he's got a presentation for us again. Just quickly, obviously the location-based stuff, and with all the new movable glasses and things coming out, this is an interesting time and a great time to see about what's going on. So Bob, I'm going to give you control. I'm going to switch my video and audio off, and everybody welcome Bob Cooney.
That might have been the best introduction I've ever had, Larry. We've got a pretty good speaker today, so I appreciate that. Just kidding. Bob Cooney, we're going to talk about XR and LBE. I'm going to go fast, and then we'll be around for questions, but I'll try to blast through this for you. I've been in LBE for 35 years. I started one of the very first laser tag companies in 1989. It was called LaserStorm. We were number 251 of the Inc. 500. I'm only doing this to kind of give you an idea of the perspective that I have in the industry. Took it on a NASDAQ IPO in 96, and then helped launch the very first VR product. It was called Virtuality, from a company called W Industries. A guy named Jonathan Waldron in London in the UK started it. And we brought it to a show called IAAPA, International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions, in 1991. It was crazy back then. The game was called Dactyl Nightmare. It was 8-bit graphics. The lag time was measured in seconds instead of milliseconds. But it captured the imagination of people from around the world, really. We had lines and lines and lines of people to try it out. And we actually built laser tag and virtual reality centers in malls with a company called Edison Brothers, which incubated Dave & Buster's when they had 2 stores, and had these Exhilarama, these big anchor entertainment centers in malls, because malls wanted to become entertainment centers back in the 90s too. Everything old becomes new again. So I've been around virtual reality in location-based entertainment since the early 90s. And then after Virtuality and Laserstorm, I helped start the first kind of real successful virtual reality entertainment company. It was called Global VR out of San Jose, and we built this thing called the VR Vortec, which had a boom-mounted display, because the virtuality headset was like wearing a car in your head. And we sold thousands of these around the world. Every major arcade globally had one of these. A game that was the hit was called Beachhead 2000. It was a turret shooter. And that was really the first and maybe last VR product for a couple of decades. In the meantime, I did a bunch of stuff with like emerging technology and media. We did the first large touchscreen broadband connected network with a company called eCast. And then in 2016 or 2015, I met this company out of Australia called Zero Latency, which had built a warehouse scale free roam VR system. They took PlayStation iToy cameras and mounted about 100 of them in a 4,000 square foot warehouse, built backpacks with Acer gaming computers in them, built their own 3D printed gun. And then you'd walk around this warehouse shooting zombies for 45 minutes, and it blew my mind. And so I convinced them to let me help them launch. We launched in 2016. And then I met a company in Germany called Hologate, which had created kind of a compact version of a VR arcade system. And we took that to IAPA in 2017. And VR in LBE at that point in family entertainment centers and stuff were off to the races. While that was happening, HTC Vive had launched this thing called Viveport. They had the Vive headset, nobody was buying it. A guy named Ricard Streiber decided that if they could get arcades going and work out a licensing program for arcades to get VR games, people would have the opportunity to try more VR. So they launched Viveport Arcade, and all of a sudden you started to see these room scale virtual reality arcades popping up around the world. It started in China and then worked its way to the West. Since then, I've worked with, 25 different location-based VR companies, helping them with their go-to-market strategy and their launch plans. I've worked with, half a dozen big operating companies to try to figure out how to implement virtual reality into their market. And I wrote a book, big deal. And the reason that I talk about that is just to give you some idea of, I've been doing this a long, long time. I've seen patterns, I've seen trends, I've seen companies come and go. And the market's kind of gone up and down, and the pandemic came and slowed things down. And this year the last year, we've seen some real momentum in this industry. We've seen business models solidify. We've seen some big investment now sniffing around the market, coming back in. And I thought it was the time to start a trade association, as you do. So I started this association. It's a nonprofit. It's called the Location-Based Entertainment XR Association. We launched it this summer, and it's getting a lot of momentum. And so if you're interested at the end, I'll give you a QR code and you can get more information about that if you're interested in potentially working in this space. I think like a lot of people in VR, we were really captivated when Mark Zuckerberg spent $2 billion to buy Oculus, and said that he wanted to see 1 billion people in virtual reality. And a lot of people got into virtual reality, a lot of money came into virtual reality. But for anybody working in virtual reality, it's kind of felt like this, I think. Like you're just running and running and running, and there's a brick wall in front of us. And I think in the VR arcade industry, it's been like that. We've had lots of false starts. It started out, this is when I was a kid, we had these Aladdin's castles and malls around the country, and they were kind of these dingy arcades that you'd go into. And the VR arcade market started out like that. It was, a bunch of hobbyists that bought some, Oculus or Vive headsets and put some tape on the floor and hung some shower curtains and offered unlicensed games that they rented out by the minute. And then the Chinese manufacturers came into the market, and they started selling these really fancy but really janky arcade simulators that people would start popping up in malls and small arcades, and then some companies. This is an example of the arcade started getting more sophisticated. We started seeing companies like IMAX built an arcade, or a couple of them, and some game developers built them, and franchise companies came and started building them. But it was all this kind of rent by the minute computer stuff, and it was not social. People were locked in a booth by themselves, and it was a novelty factor, but it never really took off and never really built a business model that operators could make money with. It was just very much a cottage, hobbyist industry. But it's changed. This is a video I shot this week here I'm in Antwerp right now, working with a company called The Park. They've been around for 7 years. And this is what you see when you walk into the Park playground, which is this beautiful space with, blonde wood and plants and bright colors that appeal to a broad demographic. It's a big sunlit open space. And it doesn't feel like that dark, dingy arcade. And what's happening is, as these spaces mature and these businesses mature, you're seeing them start to appeal to big groups, corporate training groups for entertainment, team building, every demographic across the spectrum. And so the arcade market is changing, but it's still hard to make money because the throughput's limited. It's gaming, it's a lot of shooter games, and they still have relatively narrow demographic appeal. Now, while that's going on, we're also seeing these bigger simulators come and start to go into theme parks. Now, this is from a company in Turkey called DOF Robotics. And I shot this at the IAPA show in Barcelona a couple of weeks ago. And this is called the Hurricane. They've deployed over 350 of these. They're about $200,000 each. It's a 7 DOF simulator, whatever the hell that means. And it's fascinating, and people freaking love it. And we're starting to see these real VR and LBE put into these amazing experiences. Now, this is probably my all-time favorite experience. This is called Jump. This is outside of Salt Lake City. It's worth the trip. If you ever get to Salt Lake City, you have to do this. It's from the guy, his name's James Jensen, and he was the technical co-founder of The Void, if you guys were paying attention to virtual reality in 2016, 2017, 2018 period. This is a wingsuit flying experience, and you put on a real wingsuit, you jump into a wind tunnel with a VR headset. And what they do is they take a helicopter and they go fly over real jump points, and they capture it with photogrammetry. They render it in Unreal 5. And then you feel like you're jumping with your friends doing wingsuit flying, which I think there's 10,000 people in the world that are licensed to do this. It's one of the most dangerous sports that you can do. And so we're seeing these VR now used in LBE. And by the way, they charge $120 per jump for this, and they're constantly sold out. Now, what's happened in the last couple of years, we're all hearing this term mixed reality, not to be confused with augmented reality, which I know Larry's going to want to talk about a little bit later with AR glasses coming, but this is mixed reality. And just in case, my definition of this is, it's a VR headset with full color stereo pass through. So you're not actually looking at the world, you're looking at the world through cameras and lenses, and then you're projecting other experiences into that world. This is an experience I got to do in Osaka from a company called Tifonium, and they call this Mirage. And it was actually at a shopping center in a park, and you put on an Apple Vision Pro and you wander through the park, having this amazingly beautiful mixed reality experience. And next thing you know, you're flying over the park, battling a dragon. And then they dial back the mixed reality into virtual reality, and they've created a digital twin of the city, and you fly over the city before it lands you safely back in front of the shopping center. It was really interesting. And so we're starting to see mixed reality come into LBE now, which opens up new opportunities. Now, this is one that I did last week in outside of Barcelona, and it's at PortAventura, which is a theme park there, celebrating their 30th anniversary. And this is called El Diablo Neo. And it uses a Pico 4 Ultra Enterprise mixed reality headset. It was an extra €6. And what they've done is they've taken kind of an old roller coaster and they've made it more modern. So as you're going through the roller coaster, as you can see in the video, you actually see the track. Back in 2016, 2017, there were some VR coaster things done. There were about 100 of them popped up in the world. Everybody was buying into the VR hype that you needed to put VR into everything. And the VR coaster thing kind of came and went because you lost the visuals of the coaster and it slowed down throughput and it made people sick. But this was great. There was no lag, no motion sickness. You're actually on the coaster, but next thing you know, you're getting eaten by a snake. And it was really fun and exhilarating. And I think you're going to see a lot of this coming into theme parks in the near future. And then this was at the same place at PortAventura. This was kind of a walkthrough horror experience where you go into a themed area with real props. This had real chairs and crates and fake windows. But you put on this, they were using an Oculus Quest headset for this one. And you sit down and you do a seance, and then these ghosts come to life and things start moving around the room and the floor starts vibrating. And you walk through this space and you see the real props in the space, but then you also see the virtual objects. And one of the powerful things about mixed reality, Doug Trumbull told me once when we were talking about this, may he rest in peace, about a decade ago, we were at a conference together, and he said, when your eye sees something that it knows is real, like a table, and you see a dinosaur walking across the table in AR or MR, your brain knows the table is real, so it thinks the dinosaur is real. And MR can really help you suspend disbelief. And there were both times in both of these experiences, the coaster and this walkthrough experience, which is called Hysteria, I had to take my headset off to see what was real and what wasn't. It was that compelling. And this is, you can see the actual photo of the space. So you can see there are real props in there, but all the animated stuff is fake. Now, a good friend of mine named Brent Bushnell, Brent started a company called 2-Bit Circus a decade ago in LA. Hopefully some of you guys got to go there before the pandemic shut him down. He has a smaller version of it on the 3rd Street Promenade now. And he's helped incubate and launch a company called Dream Park. And what Dream Park is doing is creating this mixed reality playground or theme park that can go anywhere. It can go in a park. This is actual video on the 3rd Street Promenade. They just converted it a warehouse in Seattle to a 25,000 square foot dream park. And it's purely virtual. We're calling it the downloadable theme parks, where you have a little bit of infrastructure, some atoms, and a whole lot of bits. To coin what, to rephrase what Nicholas Negroponte wrote in Being Virtual and Being Digital back in the 90s. And this is ability to build something once, deploy it many times. Theme parks, family entertainment centers have billions of dollars worth of atoms deployed. And with mixed reality now, you have the ability to shift that more to bits. And it's just a great, exciting time to take off. And so family entertainment centers adopting VR, arcades are evolving, theme parks are now doing VR. We're seeing it in a lot of places, but the place we haven't seen it take off is in theaters. And I find that interesting. And I think there's a reason for that. And this is probably pointing to what I think is one of the biggest opportunities in this space. Movie theaters are a shared experience. Storytelling is a shared experience. And the VR theaters that we've seen have been really passive. You sit there, you don't really do anything. And when you're in VR, you expect to have some level of agency or interactivity, right? And frankly, the experiences aren't any better than IMAX. You can't eat popcorn and drink with a headset. There's no role to play in the experience. You're just kind of sitting there. And this is a video of a friend of mine's theater called the Positron Voyager. Of anybody that's doing anything, they're doing the best work in that space. He's been at it for 10 years. It just hasn't taken off. But there are things that are taking off in immersive theater right now, or immersive visual theaters. I don't want to get it confused with the live theater stuff that's happening, like Sleep No More. But you've all heard of the Sphere, which is an interesting, exciting development. It was just named one of Time's 25 biggest inventions of the year. It cost $2 billion to build. They recently launched a remake, reimagining of The Wizard of Oz, which got lots of controversy, but is doing $650,000 in revenue per show and up to $2 million a day in ticket sales. According to the Wrap, people are paying $120 to see a 75-minute shortened version of The Wizard of Oz in this amazing immersive format. There's a company in LA, hopefully you've gotten a chance to do this, called Cosm, over by the new LA Stadium. It's in conjunction with Little Cinema. They launched The Matrix. I got to do that. I thought it was a great way to re-experience a legacy movie. They've announced now the original Willy Wonka with Gene Wilder is coming back. I can't wait to try that one. Tickets for those are $60 plus F&B. It cost me about $150 to take my partner Kylie to see The Matrix there. Now it cost about $80 million to build a Cosm. They've got one in Dallas, one in LA. They're building one in Atlanta, another in Detroit, I know. They just raised about $250 million at a very high valuation to continue to build these things. And so people are really captivated by immersive storytelling. And then IMAX is like the hit story of the theater industry. It's the only company that's actually blowing out numbers when it comes to movie theaters. Right now, on opening weekend for films like Final Reckoning with Tom Cruise and F1 with Brad Pitt, and even the new Sinners movie, IMAX generated 20% of the box office on only 400 screens. Like crazy outperforming over-indexing numbers. And the average ticket price is about $18 to $19 in the US versus $12 for a senior regular ticket. And so people are willing to pay 50% more to see an immersive version of a movie. And while the box office continues to shrink, IMAX sales are up 41% this year over last year. And so people want immersive entertainment. And so what does that have to do with virtual reality? I'm glad you asked. So the secrets to that are buried under the ancient Egyptian pyramids. I don't know if any of you have done this, but there's an experience that's been around for about 3 years. It's touring. It's called Horizon of Khufu. It was developed by a company in France called Xcurio. And it's a trip it's a 45-minute warehouse scale, free roam virtual reality experience. You put on a headset, it's 10,000 square feet. It can take up to 120 people at a time. And you're walking through this narrated adventure, put it in quotes, where you're learning about the ancient period. You get to go inside the pyramids, you get to see an embalming. So it's kind of like this cultural art entertainment experience. And it's toured in over 17 countries now. It's generated over $25 million in ticket sales in the last 3 years, and it continues to grow. And now operators, after touring it for a while and seeing the amount of money they can make, they're starting to build dedicated venues. Now, this is a Google map shot of a place in New York called Eclipso. There's 7 or 8 Eclipsos now around the country. Most of them in Europe. This one's in New York. It's a permanent facility. They took over an old BMW dealership in Midtown Manhattan. And I just wanted to show you the Google reviews. 4.9. Now, this is a 45-minute experience in VR. There's no interactivity. It's kind of a passive walkthrough experience. It can and will get better. But people freaking love it. It's a $38 ticket. So people are paying $38 for a 45-minute VR experience. And it's got a 4.9 Google review, and thousands of people have reviewed it. And so people right away say, oh, nobody wants to do VR. They don't want to put a headset on. They don't want to do it for more than 15 or 20 minutes or a half an hour. And I just showed this to you that none of that stuff is backed up by the data that I see coming out of the industry. And so this is a new space that was just announced recently in Rosemont outside of O'Hare in Chicago. It's called EXP, Experience Center. It's a 20,000 square foot permanent facility that's going to host experiences like Horizons of Khufu and some of the other ones coming from these free roam virtual reality storytelling companies. And there's a bunch of companies that are building in this space, both on the operation side and on the content side. This place will be able to handle 250 people at a time. And this is what it looks like inside. Now, the beautiful part of this is all you really need, you don't have to, it's not a $2 billion build. It's not an $80 million build. Your CapEx to build one of these is a headset for each person. Most companies are now switching to the Pico Ultra and Pico 4 Ultra Enterprise. It's about a $700 headset. You put a bunch of stickers on the wall for tracking markers, and some Wi-Fi routers and a computer, and that's your CapEx, right? So the CapEx of this is measured in 6 figures instead of 8, 9, or 10 figures. The return on investment is way faster than anything we've ever seen in location-based virtual reality or even in out-of-home immersive entertainment, which is why you're seeing this really start to grow fast. Now, a company I've done some work with out of Barcelona has taken this business model of 100 people in 10,000 square feet, and they've shrunken it down. And I love this. This is about a 2,500 square foot layout. They can do 50 people in 2,500 square feet. And the way they do it is something the Void kind of introduced us to in 2016 and 2017, which is redirected walking. And so in this map, you walk around the outside corridor and you go into the middle chamber, which is like a cutscene in a movie. And these are all interactive experiences too, so you can explore and touch things. And you have a scene, and then when the scene is over, each scene's 5 or 7 minutes, you walk out of that scene back around the corridor, which takes you as a segue into scene 2, and then scene 3 and scene 4. And so the scenes are stacked on top of each other. But the cool thing is I might be going into scene 1, you might be on scene 3, somebody else is seeing scene 5 in the same space. So people are coming in, people are walking around, people are leaving. It's a constant flow of people, kind of like a haunted house, and gives a really efficient use of space. So you can fit this inside a typical multiplex. And that's the thing that I love about this. There are 200,000 movie theaters, movie screens in multiplexes worldwide. 200,000 movie screens. The US has 31,000 movie screens in America. 18% of those are underutilized. That's 5,000 screens that cinema owners are saying gathering dust. And so there's an opportunity to convert those. You could convert as 10% of the addressable market, and it's a $500 million a year business. And I think that to me is probably the most exciting. Whoops, what happened? Where'd I go? I lost myself. There we go. I'm back. The most exciting opportunity I've seen in 30 years of location-based entertainment, 35 years, and certainly in 10 years of virtual reality in LBE. And so I'll use that to kind of kick off the conversation with Larry. I know he's going to want to talk about augmented reality and where that's going, and I have a lot of opinions on that. In the meantime, scan that QR code. That'll take you to the Lexra website. If you're interested in this space, please consider getting involved. I would love to make some introductions. There's some really great companies in there that are doing amazing work in this space. We'll be doing some events. We're going to be doing, I think next year at AWE, we're going to be running a workshop for developers that are thinking about building an LBE. And so we're going to be doing a lot of stuff. So follow us on LinkedIn. You can follow me on Bob Cooney on LinkedIn. Lexra has a page on LinkedIn. You can get involved and check out our website. And yeah, thanks, Fran, for putting the link in the chat. And I'd invite Larry to come back and ask me interesting questions.
Okay. Well, that was great, by the way, that presentation. A lot of information, a lot of good, and a lot of it brand new. I mean, obviously from the trip you've been taking. Let's just start there. The things that you've just shown, some of the things from Barcelona and from your trip, they look like major leaps ahead in what's been done. I mean, you've already laid out the past, going back to Dactyl Nightmare and those units. And I remember I was trying to sell them all to Miller Brewing and get people to use them all for marketing. That's what brought me into this world in New York back in that day. And it was it was a hard sell back then because it was just so new. But now again, we've got 30 years of, we say, roller coaster riding. So what do you think is really the best new opportunity in that side of things, in terms of comparing the theme parks to the freestandings that you've been which are one thing, to to kind of the dream park kind of pieces. So, I mean, again, we've got an audience, maybe about 30 some odd people here who are developers, creative people in the LA area. We all know what's happening to film and other things in LA. So if people were interested in looking at this stuff, where would you suggest?
Yeah, look, I think that I'm a big fan of this. What we're, we got to come up with better
Lexicon,
better
yeah.
lexicon for this, right? But they're calling it large scale free roam. There's
Right.
probably 1,000 of those have popped up in China. China, obviously, big cultural art movement. The government is really supporting it in China, and it's popped up. It started in France, another place where there's a lot of art, cultural movement, and
That's the
government
thing. They're not
sponsorship.
games. It's like the thing you show with Khufu. These
It's not
are
games.
these are museums. These are basically
Yeah.
museums where they could clone all the artifacts and have
Yeah,
multiple. Yeah.
But look, I think if you look at where Cosm came out of Evans and Sutherland, right? And Evans and
Right.
Sutherland was doing dome theaters and museums, so you can see I can see the dots. But now it's mainstream entertainment. It's sports viewing. Apple just announced they're going to be showing some live streams of the LA Laker games on Apple
Right.
Vision Pro, and so you can see what happened over the last 30 years with Evans and Sutherland going into Cosm and dome theaters, going from kind of more niche entertainment, edutainment, I hate that term, experiences into mainstream movies. Just look at IMAX. IMAX was in museums, and then
Right.
they launched, they did a re-release of Apollo 17, and next thing you know, a couple of years
That's
later,
right.
they're
It
doing
started
Day
with
and Date
dinosaurs and shuttle launches.
Yeah,
Kind of
right.
those kind of
And now it's
documentaries.
mainstream. And now it's mainstream entertainment. And so I think what you're going to see, but it's going to happen a lot faster as everything does, is you're going to see this hot because there's a business model. What VR and LBE
Right.
has lacked has been a business model. The
Right.
arcades didn't have enough throughput. There's the customer acquisition cost is too high. And so what we're seeing with these cultural and art installations, which are blowing up in museums all around the world, is we're going to see them start to go entertainment. And I have some proof points there. So Universe, which is the company I told you about, is shrinking this model down out of Barcelona. They're
Right.
working on an experience, and this has been kind of pseudo announced, with Banijay, which owns Black Mirror. And so they're creating a Black Mirror 45-minute walkthrough virtual reality experience with some early mixed reality in the lobby for a pre-show.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to launch in March of 2026 in London. Rumor is, and I've heard this rumor from multiple places, this is not inside information, that Felix and Paul is working to bring Dune into that experience as well. So we're starting to see, and Weaver is building in this space. Weaver did The Blue, which was a beautiful mixed virtual
These
reality.
were all the first
underwater experience.
generation of the VR 2015 bubble. Yeah.
And they also did the Harry Potter experience with Warner Brothers. And so if you look at the
Right.
dots that I see, is Sphere, Wizard of Oz is a Warner Brothers title.
Right.
Matrix is Warner Brothers. Willy Wonka is Warner Brothers. Warner's big in this space. Warner is Harry Potter. I'm not saying they're going to get Harry Potter. It might be too early and hard to work with, but Weaver has a deep relationship with Warner based on their Harry Potter experience.
Right.
They did a great job with that in VR in New York. And so we're going to see major IPs moving into this space, in this large scale free roam VR space. And I think it's a thrilling, exciting place to be.
I think you're right. I mean, and just to throw in the thought that, of course, Warner Brothers, all the old main media companies are all getting bought up right now and
by tech
recycled.
companies.
That's right. And they're all, and so they're all taking a new, fresh look at their IP.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I mean, right now the press has been, it's the fall right now. They put out 4 mainstream movies. They're not making more than $50 million, $40 million at opening. And they're lamenting the end of the Hollywood at this point. So they got to find other revenue,
And I've spoken to theater owners, not the big ones, unfortunately 80%, it's the 80-20 rule. I think the top 6 chains, control 70% of the screens in America. But there are thousands of theater owners. There's a long tail. And I've spoken to some of the bigger companies at the head of the long tail of theaters, and they're desperate for this. They're like, if you can take my theater that's doing $150,000 a year and give me $1 million in top line revenue, I'll kiss your ass. Well, so this is coming. I'm going to build in this space. I know everybody's looking at this space, and I think that it's exciting. Now the challenges though are this is a new storytelling medium.
Right.
You don't quite know how to tell stories in virtual reality yet. There have been a couple of, you know, the submarine experience in AVP was interesting. But you know, there's and
These aren't choose your own adventures. There's something different going on here.
Yeah, you're part of the story, but people don't necessarily want to be a character in the story.
Right.
They don't want to have agency, but they want interactivity. And so we're trying to figure out where the dials are to figure out where to put the person in the story. But that comes with
immersion versus interactivity,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that balance between the two. Because again, there's nothing more immersion, you know, immersive is being on a roller coaster, nothing more immersive than that. You know, interactive is being able to play with the dials on a board somewhere,
Yeah.
you know. But you're right, it's finding that happy in between. And then again,
Yeah.
also being able to put into these locations. The other thing I'll bring up and your thoughts about is since the retail market also since COVID and now with the future coming has also been a disaster, you know, in terms of its long-term future. Those are these mall spaces. Are you finding an interest in moving into more of the old malls that are emptied still? There's still so much real estate that was built, you know, that still exists. I mean, we have malls that have closed now in California.
Yeah, look, I think that and this happened, this is what I said, in the 90s, you know, Edison Brothers was the largest mall retail store operator in the world back in the early 90s when they were my first customer at LaserStorm. They had, you know, they had 10, 12 different fashion brands in malls, and they wanted to and malls wanted entertainment back then because malls were dying, right? And so whatever, you know, this shit all comes in cycles.
At that point, it was Walmart killing the malls. Now it's
the internet killing the malls,
and
but malls are actually coming back. If you look at the real estate trends, mall occupancy right now is at the highest rate it's been in decade. And so on one hand, there's this narrative that malls are dying, but the stats from CBRE suggest otherwise. Now, there are some malls that are dying, and they're, you know, and those are shit malls. And whether you want to build an entertainment center in a shit mall, your mileage may vary. If you get the right deal, that's fine. But, you know, the key to this stuff, real estate's a key to this stuff, and you got to be really careful. And so, I don't know, this is destination stuff. This is, you buy 99% of the tickets are bought in advance. It's like a theater, it's a destination. And so malls, generally, you're paying rent for traffic. And you're not necessarily going to convert the traffic when you're doing virtual reality in a mall. And so you might be overpaying for rent. And then that was a mall developer calling me. And then you still have to pay for marketing, and customer acquisition cost marketing is probably the highest risk expense in these businesses. So I think malls just real estate. Malls don't want to operate. They just want to rent space. They just want to rent space, and they want to rent it for as much as possible. So just be careful buying into that narrative is my experience.
It's interesting though, but but you were saying that most of these tickets are bought in advance, destination. So so now the business model, they understand who's showing up and when. I mean, we both know back in the old days it was the so-called Tuesday or Wednesday night problem of all movie theaters would have, is that you're crowded Friday and Saturday, but Tuesday night, Wednesday night, it's empty. But at least now it's all being done in advance with tickets. And
it's all being done. It's all being done in advance, but you still have the issue. Like, people just don't, like, they have other shit to do on Tuesday night, right? They got to make dinner, they got to feed the kids, they got to do homework, and so we're still seeing, you know, casual entertainment traffic on weekends. But the thing that Khufu is generating is a lot of senior groups. So you won't get this in an arcade because it's gaming, but when you expand beyond gaming, now they're getting, you know, senior groups, retirees, they're getting school groups coming in for virtual field trips. There's actually a couple of companies that are taking large-scale free roam into school gymnasiums. So there's a company called VR Core that's working with NASA, and they've done an ISS experience that they take out into a field for a virtual field trip into a school. And so because this stuff is so portable and easy to transport and set up, we're seeing it go everywhere. And so those new edge cases are still being developed. But yeah, the weekend thing, which, look, And that's why this new model of large scale free roam works, because you can move a lot of people through on the weekend. If you've got a VR
Right.
arcade, you might only be able to get 20 or 30 people in at peak time, for 45 minutes or an hour. Now I can do 50, 60, 100, 200 people an hour. I can do theme park volume in a relatively small retail space, so I can take advantage of the weekend times when people want to be entertained.
Right. And I assume also then there's a flexibility in the empty spaces that, I mean, the setup times to go from, Khufu to, let's say Versailles,
Yeah.
from an exhibit on Versailles in France to an exhibit in Egypt to an exhibit in, of Mexico, of like an ancient temple. I'm assuming that, there's the markers maybe need to be rearranged a little bit to some degree, maybe, but maybe not. And so therefore it's just an overlay of running a different program in Unreal or whatever.
It's just a big open space, right? And so it's a canvas, just like a projection screen is. And so
Right.
you change you push a button, you change the content. The content is all resident, on the headsets. You just like switching it over. It's really flexible and
What
now,
is the
good.
in terms of content again for the is it Unreal now, Unity and Unreal, or is it more Unreal than Unity? What do you see in terms of what they're using now? You mentioned the hardware. Pico is having a growth spurt now, where it used to be HTC. So what about the graphics?
I think that's one of the emerging questions we'll see. So back when Khufu launched, back when Zero Latency launched, it was backpack PCs, it was PC VR, and a lot of the work was done in Unreal because you could really, you could show the beauty of the Unreal,
right,
content experience in a PC. Everything's shifted off of PCs onto standalone headsets now. So they're all running the XR version of the XR2 chip. There's only so much you can do with a mobile chipset when it comes to, textures and lighting and how many polygons you get. And so a lot of the content is still, I think, happening in Unity because you can't necessarily get the benefit of Unreal in a mobile chipset. Now, there might be some people who argue that with me. Not my jam. I defer to your expertise. But I do believe that those chipsets are going to keep getting better, hopefully. And the headsets might get more expensive. We might move from and I know, and this is happening. We might move from an $800 headset to a $2,000 headset, but we get a PC, we get an M-class chip in it, which makes the experience that much better. And so that's one of the areas where we're going to have to see what develops and what comes from the tech. But right now, probably mostly Unity-based. And look, I just did an experience in Barcelona from a company called HeroZone, which is one of the leading VR arcade game suppliers. There was a Terminator Uprising, and they're using mobile chipsets, and the graphics were fantastic. I was blown away by how good it is. So developers are figuring out how to get the most out of these chips right now. And so we'll see how that happens. But I will tell you, studios, when you're talking about AAA IP, care about quality. And so they're not going to want a shitty version of Harry Potter or depending on who they license Dune from. If it's Warner, they might care if it's the original Heinlein, or who wrote, was it Heinlein that wrote Dune? You'd know that, Larry.
Dune is Frank Herbert.
Frank Herbert, thank you. It was an H. They might not care, and it might be more cartoony. We'll have to see, but it will affect what IPs are available in the short term.
Well, again, the aesthetic of a piece of content. If it's good, it's good, and if the audience likes it, the audience likes it. So it's always what works and what doesn't. If it works, Absolutely. It works. And then you're everybody's heroes. So so you're saying that most of them now have switched to the mobile, like the Picos and the Quest 3s. I'm assuming is what they.
And the Focus Vision is the HTC's latest version. Yeah.
Okay, and so where do we'll bring up the other stuff. Where do you see now is anything moved into the, obviously we all have some familiarity with the HMDs right now, and you're saying in terms of mixed reality is what you're saying is so successful now, and again,
it's opening up new opportunities for different types of experiences, I'll say.
Right. So Well, maybe we'll stay with the mixed reality stuff right now, because again, that sounds so interesting. I mean, the haunted house type space
Every
you're
haunted
saying,
house in America should be running a mixed reality experience.
and
It's
and
such a
that's
no-brainer that I
and that
don't know
sounds
why
like
it's not
it
happening.
should be a natural extension to the escape room places,
Yep,
because they are
absolutely.
essentially, low decor set pieces,
Yep.
and if they want to add stuff to it, it's like this is a no-brainer, isn't it? I mean, as
Yeah.
a developer, as a small studio, to find the local, places near you that do escape room type stuff.
Look, I will say that, it costs 30, 40, 50 grand to do a really good physical escape room. Some companies spend 100 grand.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that it makes sense to build a one-off experience in MR for one escape room location. The leverage you get here, and this is the downloadable theme park concept, is build
That's what,
once, deploy many times, right? And so
right.
you build it once and you deploy it across 50 escape rooms, and now all of a sudden you can do amazing work, right? Like this could be Hollywood quality work, quote unquote,
Quote unquote.
where versus kind of a janky escape room that and so I do think that's a massive opportunity that we'll see emerge in the next year or two. Same with haunted houses. My friend Joe Maras, who's a game developer in LA, he's done a haunted house, very simple one. I'm sure there's more companies
Yes.
working in that space. It's
Right.
still a
I
low
think he
lying
was at
fruit.
AWE showing it off, if I
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
if
he
I
was.
met him.
Yeah,
And I saw it, and I was going to try and get him connected up to a friend of mine, Eric Lobo, who's a haunted, TV host, haunted, TV movie host in the Elvira kind of Swinguli market.
yeah.
And so it seems natural. They have a studio where they shoot out of, so they have the ability to combine it with television and combine that. That's what I was talking to him about, which is again, it's just a way of making this stuff more. Well, no, actually, that's an interesting question. Maybe we'll talk about Lexra for a moment. Uh, is there an attempt? I guess maybe what you're doing is, in some ways, with Lexra, maybe it should be, whereas they usually be like black books for a tech, for an industry, but usually they're on just a technology, a way to get a computer from or whatever. But here, in a sense, maybe there needs to be almost a like a movie listing page in local papers or websites instead of movies. This type of medium needs its own name in a sense, and I'm getting that.
Absolutely. Look, I think one of the big challenges that we're seeing is, sorry, I blanked myself out. So one of the big challenges we're seeing is there's no context for this. So virtual reality, like if I say I'm going to the movies, everybody knows what I mean, right? I'm going to the
Exactly.
movies. If I'm going
That's
to go
right.
to a VR arcade, everybody knows what that is,
And
right?
they
I'm
also
going to a
know where to
VR, it's an
look for
arcade, I'm
what
going to play
movies they
games.
want to see. They know to go to Movie Phone. They know to go to
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
websites.
Yeah. And if I'm going to go to an arcade, there's going to be a bunch of games. I mean, I know what that is. There's a contextual layer for people to even talk about that. This large scale, free roam, warehouse scale, storytelling, art, immersive culture. What the fuck is it, right? Nobody has any idea
Right.
what to call it. And so we're actually, I'll tell you here, this is kind of a quasi confidential thing. Don't tell anybody, but we're about to
Don't talk
launch a
about it.
consumer brand called Walkthrough Theater.
There you go.
And that's what it is. We used to have silent movies, and then we had talking pictures. And now,
Right.
and we used to go to a drive-in theater, and now we have a walkthrough theater. And we want to call these, instead of talkies, we want to call them walkies. And so we're going to be starting to come up with a lexicon that people can grab onto about these
Right.
experiences. Everybody knows what a dome theater is now.
Right.
So this is a walkthrough theater, and hopefully that, maybe that catches on. Maybe somebody's got something better. We'll see what happens. But we're going to start pushing on that in the next month and start putting that out in the public space and see
Well,
what
I think
happens.
that's very smart. I mean, you mentioned domes. I mean, we have Ed Lance here in the theater, who's in the audience, and my sister, who knows nothing about technology, when she was in Vegas, she went to the dome. Just the way it was. It was like going to see Cirque du Soleil or Frank Sinatra. She went to
Exactly.
the dome, and she knew it was the dome because they heard it was the dome. They didn't know what they'd see.
Hey,
Yep.
I also want to show you this. So
Yep.
this is a website that we built talking about a
Hmm.
directory called the VR Collective. And you can go to vrcollective.com, and this has a directory of over 400 different location-based XR experiences from, I don't know, 100 different companies. You can click on any one and get a full listing of what it is and how it works and kind of a description. And it's got simulators and escape rooms and storytelling experiences. And it's the vrcollective.com. It's something that we rolled into Lexra as part of the media platform when we launched Lexra earlier this year. And so this is a really good resource that you can come in and kind of.
I see Fran just put the URL up in the chat box.
And somebody was asking about the experience, the Terminator experience, and they're advertising here on the homepage. So if you go to the homepage of the VR Collective, you can click through to Hero Zone. This product hasn't launched yet. It launches in Q1, and but it'll be in over 500 locations around the world in 40 countries.
It just has a relationship to the old the Terminator Uprising used to be like not a Disney, but one of those LBE movies. 3D. It was a 3D movie, I think.
Yeah, I think it was a similar name, but not the same name. This was
not the same thing. In other words, it's a totally new content.
It's a new content, and it's a wave shooter. Like, it's not. I don't want to oversell this. It's a 10-minute wave shooter arcade game, right? Like, it's super simple, but it's really fun. It's leveraging IP, and it's going to be the biggest It's going to be the biggest global launch of a location-based VR product ever. 500 locations, 40 countries, same day and date. So it'll be interesting to see if they can leverage that.
Wow. And this is coming from a company from Barcelona? Was that?
They're actually here in Belgium called Hero Zone, and they've been around since 2016, 2017. Yeah.
Do you find that in Europe right now, in terms of investment, in terms of interest, that it's still greater than it is overall in the States, other than maybe a small group out of California?
Yeah, look, interesting question. I definitely felt, in fact, I just wrote a blog. By the way, if you sign up on the VR Collective website, if you sign up for the Inside VR newsletter, every 2 weeks I send out all the news happening and one insight piece that I write. And if you're interested in this space, that's the best way to keep up on it. And look, the IAAPA is our big industry convention. It's like the CES of theme parks and amusement experiences. They have one in Europe, one in Asia, one in Orlando every year. The Orlando one's massive, 40,000 people. Barcelona is about a quarter the size. I will say that the excitement was palpable in Barcelona this year about VR in LBE. Lots of companies doing interesting things, pushing the envelope. America had a bit of a false start. We adopted it early, and then hit the pandemic, and operators just bad taste in their mouth, right? Like supply chain issues, they couldn't get cables to replace the headset cables that broke, and labor costs went through the roof, and people didn't want to put stuff on their face, and they haven't quite recovered from the trauma, the PTSD of VR in 2018, 2019.
It's the curse of VR over every decade. It happens.
Yeah. But Europe has this really kind of beginner's mind towards it, and they're excited, and all the interesting stuff, frankly, is happening in Europe. And I'm trying to get America to pay close attention because we're going to miss the boat,
Right.
Yeah, but I think, look, somebody will figure it out eventually, and we'll see.
Right.
We'll see it grow here fast.
America will just buy it when they need to. That's how they've done things in the past with European tech. But the one, again, back to the museum type area stuff, the non-entertainment. The non-entertainment type stuff. So are there others that you've seen out there other than the Egypt type? I mean, that's
yeah. Great question. Thanks, Lee. Because so there's so you've all been to one of those projection Van Gogh experiences by now, right? Like, it's been around for 20 years, kind of jumped the shark.
That's right.
And so what those companies are doing is they're now incorporating virtual reality as an add-on experience to drive ticket price higher and to get people to come back and do it. I did one in Melbourne at the Loom over Christmas last year called Finding Vincent. And it was a 15-minute experience where you're helping Vincent's brother Theo find Vincent van Gogh after he was taken away to a mental institution. So recreating a slice of history. And it was beautiful. It was great storytelling. like it really blew my mind, and it kind of showed me what's possible in this space. And the Loom was interested in it because they're like, these spaces, these projection spaces cost millions of dollars to build. They take up tens of thousands of square feet. If I can do a similar thing and put it in 3,000 square foot, I can put it in hundreds of cities instead of tens of cities. And so the companies that are doing these big projection experiences are all putting VR components of it. And now Fever has by far the most data in this industry of anybody. They've been doing the tickets for Khufu and a lot of these VR experiences. They're building their own experiences, and they're going to build 20 venues worldwide to host these VR experiences. So when the company that has all the data starts investing their own capital in building venues, I don't know what more of an alert signal, a buy alert signal you need, but that's one of the things happening. So we're seeing a lot of companies move into this space. It's going to be messy, as all new spaces are, but I've never been more confident about a business model in my 35 years in this space.
What do you think are the bumps in the roads for these guys, knowing that we're obviously enthusiastic about it, and it does seem to be very interesting stuff. But again, with the gray hair comes the experience.
Another great question. So Fever's first experience, they built a Titanic experience. There were a bunch of Titanic experiences.
Every time there's a new medium, there's another new Titanic experience.
They did their own. They opened it up in San Francisco. It fucking bombed. They had to shut it down. The reviews were so bad. This stuff looks easy. Everybody does. It's like game. Oh, I can make a game. I like to play games. I can make a game. That's the thing. Right? I mean, I can't tell you how many shitty VR games I've played.
That's right. I mean, this is the exuberance of something new, and everybody gets in, and everybody's uncle and cousin knows a guy, and there you go.
The other one's marketing. The customer acquisition for this stuff is challenging and expensive, and companies under budget their marketing spend. I did a masterclass in Lexro. We're doing a whole series of marketing masterclasses for VR operators. And we worked with a company called Zeus, X-E-U-S. Their website is Go Zeus. If you're building in the immersive LBE space, they're the guys to talk to as far as agencies go. And they're like, you should be budgeting between 12 and 20% of your revenue for marketing.
Right.
And most of these companies undercook their marketing budget. And some companies, and Fever takes 30% if you want to work with Fever to do ticketing and marketing, which is a lot of your top line revenue going to an agency, and how much of that is left for you on the bottom line. So marketing, customer acquisition, and the quality of the content on the build side. One of the companies that I mentioned, Universe, the ones that shrunk that model, they've created a platform called XROAM, XROAM.com, which makes it really easy for developers to build in the free roam VR space. So it's a Unity plugin, and it deals with all the co-location barriers, building spaces, flow of people.
Maybe Frank can get that in
XROAM.com. And so we're seeing companies start to build platforms exclusively for free roam VR. I know Xcurio has talked about developing one. Weaver just did one with HTC. Right. So we're starting to see.
And that's very interesting because that gives independent creatives a template and a place to start. With a potential business partner who's looking to get stuff out there.
And the challenge is distribution. The biggest challenge in this space is there's no distribution. That's one of the things I'm working on.
That's what always. That's been VR's curse. Every time, look. We've been in the App Store curse, right? I mean, there was no distribution problems when all this stuff started 30 years ago because anybody and their mother could get into an Ingram Micro D catalog, and the universe exploded. And then, of course, when the web hit and WebXR the first time around VRML, again, anybody could build a website, and the universe exploded. But then, of course, we imploded into app stores. And that's been the model of VR. That was the Meta Google model, and even Apple's played that. And they're still playing it. Maybe they'll break out next year. Who knows?
Yeah.
But that made it difficult for a plethora of content to be built. And therefore, it just became too difficult because you had to put too much in the kitty with one of those three companies, to get something made. But again, if there's some templates that are coming out, it helps ease that development cycle.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And then people will learn and those platforms will evolve. And then you can, look, I would not recommend. So there's a couple of things I'm going to recommend really strongly. If you take nothing else from this and you decide to work in this space, just listen to this one thing. Don't build your own operating system at the location level. If you go to vrcollective.com, you'll see there's 100 companies. Every one of them built their own kind of location operating platform, and they all do the same thing. And so it's just a waste of development dollars. There are platforms out there that you can adopt. There's one that I like called Spawn Point out of London. There's a bunch of them. And so if you want, just reach out to me on the VR Collective or Lexra, and I'll help you navigate that space. But don't reinvent the wheel, build the car.
Right. Make the content, tell the story. And it sounds like we're at an opportunity point now where it's like, you can, a dozen different developers can make a dozen different coming attractions per se, or prototypes that these guys are going to put in there, just to fluff the 45 minutes and say coming soon, possibly, and then you get real data coming back. Does somebody even want a Titanic? Do they want a new space bunnies from from Alpha Centauri, whatever it is? Yeah. And there's an ability to at least find those partnerships, because again, it's an early growth field again.
Yeah. The other one I haven't mentioned, by the way, which is coming this month to Vegas from a company called Felix and Paul, and they're out of Montreal, another hotspot. French cultural government money, right? Like that's
and of course they use the original VR bubble to build themselves into
and so they
narrative story.
Yeah. They did an experience called The Infinite, which was filmed on the space station.
That's
big
right.
10,000 square foot space.
Work.
They're opening a new permanent venue at Area 15 in Vegas. It's called Interstellar Arc, and it opens next month. They're selling tickets now. You can kind of see this is the website, and it's a massive permanent. I want to say it's 20,000 square feet. It's got what's being called hyper reality effects. So they're mapping the physical space to the virtual space, similar to what the Void did before the pandemic. They're using wind and vibration and stuff. And this is another 45-minute mixed reality experience. It had to cost a fortune to build and deploy, and it's kind of like a space sci-fi story experience. And I can't wait to try this. These guys do great work, and that's coming really soon. I want to say they're going to open end of this month, and they're doing a VIP event the end of in a couple of weeks. If anybody wants an invite to the VIP event, it is when is it? November 5th. So it's going to open in November. So if you're going to be in Vegas on November 5th and you want to go to this, let me know, and I'll forward you a
it says $54 for adults, $39 for children.
Yeah, and some of they're $69.79 for some ticket prices, depending on weekends. It's demand-based pricing. So yeah.
You know how long the experience is at this point?
It's 45 minutes. All of these new storytelling experiences that are standalone, they have to be at least 45 minutes. It has to be about an hour. If you go to Fever, everything's about an hour. So the ones that are being done are 45 minutes plus pre-show. I'm really excited to see how Black Mirror incorporates mixed reality into the pre-show, and then there's a 45-minute VR experience to kind of seamlessly transition people from pre-show into experience. And Rigel at the Sphere is asking about that. And so really interesting to see how people are merging, doing a better. So one of the things I've been writing about for a long time is what I call, the 3-act structure. In storytelling, we have 3 acts. First, set up conflict resolution. The thing we didn't do in VR is we're great at act 2, but the pre-show has always been poorly done, and there's no conclusion at all. The first VR thing I did in Zero Latency, 45-minute epic zombie post-apocalyptic experience. At the end, I wound up in a parking lot in a warehouse district in Melbourne saying, what the hell just happened to me? And so we need to do a better job of the pre and post show to give people an on-ramp and an off-ramp to these experiences that can really be transformational.
Well, I always thought one of the great weaknesses of the whole LBE thing is that there was never at-home takeaway. I mean, that was one of the main problems with the first VR go around.
Yeah.
Was like IMAX theater. They eventually were just showing they were showing Vive demos by the time they were done, and the minute enough people bought HMDs for home, then there was no reason to go to the location based, because they could still
Yeah, I'm
play
not
the
sure that
game.
ever happened. Like, you can look at the VR stats. We still haven't sold enough headsets to stop people from going to arcades.
But again, these are all tourist places anyway, like near the Grove. I mean, it was never meant. It had never yet gotten to the point where it was like a neighborhood theater, which everybody will go to on that Saturday, Friday night. It was again like in Vegas, you go to a place when you're on vacation. You go to Disney World, and then maybe while you're at Disney World, you'll take a side trip to the alligator farm. But nobody goes to the alligator farm, if you're not on a trip to Florida. They don't go just to go to the alligator farm. But again, the point is that there was never a home takeaway, and the great part of this, what you're calling walkies, is that now it gave you a return on investment that you couldn't do at home, because nobody has 50,000 square feet at home to roam around a haunted house with combining mixed reality. The best they can do.
And teleportation sucks. Like, and it's not social. Now, virtual telepresence is going to change everything, and walkabout mini golf is an awesome social experience for the home. And so I don't want to demean what's possible there, but people still want to go out. They want to be entertained with friends. They want to have a shared experience. So, their movies are shared experiences, not social experiences. And there's this whole thing about social gaming and stuff like that. But people are okay going out and having a shared experience. And VR, one of the things I'm excited to see what Universe is doing with Black Mirror is they're doing photorealistic avatars for bound groups. So this is getting a little techie. You guys might like this. And so what they're doing is you go in, you scan your face then gets on your avatar. Now, because of the standalone headset's limited processing power, you can't render photorealistic avatars for 50, 60, 100 people at a time, like everybody that you see in the space, right?
That's right.
So what they're doing is but you need to see the other avatars for safety, because everybody, even if they're not in the same scene as you, they're in the same space.
So location, yes, I get it. Yeah.
And so what they do is they render a ghost of somebody who's not bonded to your social group, but the people in your social group, you can see their faces.
Right.
And that's going to create this really kind of like quasi shared social experience. And I'm sure there'll be an uncanny valley, but that goes away after a few minutes. Where you can kind of create this shared social experience in large-scale free roam storytelling walkies. And I think that's going to really open up the minds of people wanting to do this thing and differentiate it from movies in another way. When you're in a movie theater, like everybody, I'm sure you all heard about what was going on with Wicked and the Roblox movie, where people, or the Minecraft movie, where kids were going out and turning it into a modern Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Horror. That's right.
Theater owners were freaking out, and it's like, you can't come to the movies if you're in cosplay. And kids are like, what do you mean? Fuck you. I'm coming dressed as Glenda.
Like yeah.
and so I think that this ability to have avatars and people to express themselves in these experiences in a way that isn't disruptive to the experience, but embedded in the experience, is going to open up an entirely new market to these types of experiences, to virtual natives and to Gen Zs who grew up gaming, playing Fortnite and Minecraft. And I think it's going to capture the imagination of these next generations in a way that movies just fail to.
Yeah, well, again, new mediums, new opportunities. I mean, it's always been that. And I think, as you're saying, I think the shared experience, which is what movies have always been. I mean, young, from drive-ins to the theater, it's always been a young person's date night.
It's hard to make out in a VR headset, though.
No, well, true, but again, if the faces are at least photorealistic, people are going to be trying. They're going to be scuff marks on those HMDs. But it is, again, the return to a third space kind of world, which is what COVID ripped away, and generationally, a lot of people feel like it's been missing for at least the last 15 years. With malls and everything closing, is this third space. And you know, again, there's a limit to what you can get sitting at home in VR. You know,
And look, and one of the things, you know, I don't know if you guys all saw the announcement from Netflix last week about the party games on mobile, where you scan a QR code and now
right?
you can play mobile family party games in your living room. And you know, and there was this whole trend of living room families on TikTok last year, and so, you know, people playing together is still a thing, and doing things
Yes.
together is a thing. And I think more spaces to allow that is good for humanity.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Let's see, it's about
I know you
8:10.
want to talk about AR, and there's some
You let's
questions
talk about
about that, I
yeah,
think.
real quickly. I've had 8:10 do Q&A, but we go another 15 minutes for. Let's talk about the AR glasses.
Yeah.
You know, they're not fully 3D, most of them at this point. Well, why don't you tell us about what you know? Facebook just made a big announcement. Snap has a new model. What are your thoughts?
XReal. Yeah, look, I've been really anti-AR glasses, not the possibility of them, but the timing of them for a long time. And I think that, you know, there's the challenge has been physics, right? So waveguide optics
Right.
require brightness, field of view, and battery life. Like those are the three things.
Exactly.
You push on one, you pull back the other one. And so,
Right.
and no one was talking about those things. Nobody was talking about nits and field of view and battery life until AWE this year. XReal came out, talked about XReal Aura and the field of view and the brightness. Now, what they didn't talk about is battery life, but they talked
Battery
about
life.
the external battery tether, right? Which is going to become a thing.
Right.
Whether we tether to a phone or we tether to a battery pack, we'll have to see. And so I think
But
that
they're still not getting very long time out of the battery. I mean, they want you to wear these things 24/7. The problem is, of course, is that your battery still don't last more than 2 hours.
yeah, and so I think that, and so that's where the external battery pack can come in. So at least a company was willing to talk about it. So that gave me hope that we're getting closer to this being a reality. I still think there are challenges around it. I've played around with the Snap specs, not the new ones. No one's really, I haven't seen the new ones coming out in Q1, but well, in 2026, not Q1. Aura is coming out in Q1, I think, from XReal. I do know that Snap is very interested in LBE. They've created LBE platform APIs and an SDK now. So they're going to be pushing Snap Spectacles into the LBE space. They were one of the sponsors for my VR Attraction Summit that I run every year. And so they came out and demoed it. And Tarak, what's his name? Tariq. I can't think of his name right now. I'm bad with names. I just know too many people. He demoed it, and they're really excited about it. And I know they XReal just hired Amir, who used to run B2B for HTC and then Pico, and he's leading up their B2B efforts for XReal. And so they're going to be pushing into the LBE space. So look, I'm optimistic about narrow use cases in LBE. You've got issues around battery life, around recharge cycles. I think the Snap Spectacles recharge faster than they die, so that one's okay. You have to have multiple sets. They're about $1,000 each, so they're not cost prohibitive for B2B. But again, it's not 3D. And is it really immersive? And what kinds of
Or is it
experiences
really
are we
just
going to
more
build?
like you know, like a museum earpiece kind of thing, bringing up a HUD with, you know, what, a little TV screen that says, you know, this painting was done in, you know, I mean, is it no different than just putting a sign up next to the painting saying when it was
Well,
made?
and look, I still do. You know, I told you about the Loom that I went to with the projection Van Gogh experience, and there were so many words to read in that whole place. Like it was absurd. Like, and so in this day where everything's on video on your phone and videos everything, that these places are still printing thousands and thousands of words to tell stories is horrifying to me. And so
We
if
live now in
all
a
it does
TikTok
is
world.
replace that, Larry, we win.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I mean, again, you know, to me, AR has always been Google Maps. I mean, mapping has always been the real key for all AR, you know, because that's what you do with it. You hold up a phone or you look at a map and, you know, you navigate the world because the other
Yeah.
time is you want to be part of the world.
And And look what Dream Park is doing with, with the mixed reality.
Right.
That's crying out for AR glasses. And,
Right.
but I talked to Brent, and Brent's done them. He's like, yeah, it's not really 3D. The graphics aren't good enough. It's really
not at
not
the
as
right,
immersive as we need it to
it
be.
doesn't
And
have the
so we got
production
work to do.
value yet that they can get. And again, once people are acclimated to putting on, let's call it the Pico or the MetaQuest 3, which will keep getting, they'll get continuously smaller every 2
They'll
years.
merge, but it'll take another
Yeah.
generation.
But
I mean,
again,
like
if the
a human
experience,
generation, not a tech generation.
that's right. But again, when there's a return on investment for the experience, for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, no one cares.
And look, there is a company doing interesting work in this space. They're called Enklu, Enklu. They have a platform called Verse Immersive, and they were using HoloLens. They're switching now, with HoloLens being out of production, no longer
Right.
being supported. They're switching to Snap Spectacles. And they're in 20 plus locations, and they run these 30-minute walkthrough experiences. Some of them are art, some of them are gaming.
Right.
And people are captured by augmented reality. Kind of, look, a lot of people have done VR. A lot of people haven't. More people have not done VR than have done VR still.
Yeah, even in the last decade. Yeah.
But the AR thing is really interesting to people, and it's capturing a broader audience. There is definitely a resistance to VR by a certain segment of the market.
Right.
If you look at Horizons Akufu website, VR is in the background. It's all about storytelling. It's all about the experience. Right. And I've seen Google reviews where people went there and said, "Oh, we got here and didn't know it was virtual reality, but we loved it."
Right. Well, that's the key to the branding and the marketing, which is why, again, you put that number up about percentage. And again, it's part of what we're talking about with coming up with a lexicon. So people are going out to a third space for entertainment, or for edutainment, the way you want to, what's a museum, same thing. And museums, people, it was a post on LinkedIn about museums about a week or so ago, or something along those lines. And I made a comment, well, no, people go to museums, because it's a date or want to meet people, and those are things that can still be done if you're now combining with mixed reality, because it's a social event. And you can, whereas, even going to a movie by yourself, it's difficult to meet somebody. But when you go to a museum, the idea is you're wandering around if you're alone, and you're going to talk to somebody, and try to strike up a conversation and meet someone to have a social experience as well as looking at the work.
I think Pokemon Go, as old as that is now, is still, one of the best use cases of this technology in the open world for AR. It wasn't really AR. But as AR gets better, and it goes into wearables, I think, like finding new models that work, and new experiential models, storytelling models, gaming models that work with these, XR glasses, that AR, I'm going to say AR glasses, because there's this question about whether smart glasses with audio and AI are XR, and I don't think they are.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, well, the audio, obviously, if you're a museum type experience, could be great and helpful.
But look, that's like that would be like calling a cassette Walkman XR technology,
right? But it was called, but for years it was called, audio video or immersive reality, everything else in the world.
But take that out into the streets of New York, right, or into Central Park, or the 3rd Street Promenade, as Dream Park is doing. I think the ability to take that outside of museums into the real world and create experiences for people anywhere and everywhere is going to be interesting. And when the whole world is a downloadable theme park, do we need malls and shopping centers and arcades anymore? It's going to be, the next 10 or 20 years are going to be really, really
interesting as all that comes together.
Yeah.
So let's see, we got 8:20. Let's go. Short a presentation. Do you want to do some Q&A? We got a bunch of
always. I love Q&A. Hot seat. Put me on the hot seat, Larry.
So let's see what we got here. I see a bunch of questions here. We were discussing specific Harry Potter VR in New York. How massive was the team production that you're speaking of? Particular.
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, I can certainly find out from Weaver how big the team was. It was done in Unreal Engine.
Mhm.
It was done for the hardware platform by a company called Dreamscape. You might have remembered Dreamscape. They had a place in what's that really expensive mall
The
in
Westview, right?
Westfield? Yeah, the
Westfield, what
Westfield
they did with
Studio
was they
City,
did an
Century
alien
City.
thing. I think they did like a Jim Cameron kind of alien world. What wasn't
They
that
did. It
theirs?
was called Alien Zoo, and
There you go.
you know, and so it was using the Dreamscape platform, and they did the whole thing in Unreal. It required backpacks. It was, you know, it was pretty. It had to be a reasonably big team, and it was pretty expensive to develop. It would have been, you know, look, I talked to Aaron Grosky at Dreamscape, and you know, he said, you know, part of their challenge was they overinvested in content, and you know, they were probably spending mid seven figures. If I had to estimate, I'd say that was a $5 million budget.
It was
I can
the license. It must have been expensive.
Well, it wasn't. It was work for hire. It was done
Oh,
for
for them.
for
Okay.
Harry Potter, Warner Brothers, Harry
For
Potter,
Warner Brothers.
their
Okay.
retail pop up in New York, and
Gotcha.
it was sold out. It sold out in seconds. Like I couldn't even get a ticket to try it, and I've since tried it at Weaver's headquarters.
Where was it
in
located? Was it
LA.
Times Square? One of those type of locations?
No, somewhere in Midtown, somewhere near
Midtown.
the Empire State Building. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just wondering where, because you know, obviously, again, New York is a tourist town, so you either do Times Square or you do, you know,
And the
near
retail sales
Penn-
per minute were retail sales per square foot. You know, so it was like a Universal Studio
Right.
store. The wand, you know, trying to get in and buy a wand, like, you know, good luck.
Yeah, no.
You know,
Years ago, I worked with the AT&T InfoQuest that became the Sony Science Center and did exhibits and stuff for them. And again, it was part of the office complex, so it was they had the space for PR. But New York's an expensive space. Let's see. I got Joey Jones. How do you see XR advancing in sport arenas during sports games? And do you see Meta's collab with Ray-Ban affecting XR momentum?
Yeah, it's a great question, Joey. Thanks. So there's one of our Lexra members, a company called Virewirx, VIREWIRX. They're out of San Diego. It was co-founded by Paul Jacobs, the former CEO of Qualcomm. And long story that I won't get into now, but one of their passions is live LBE VR sports viewing. And so where they have a demo where they put you in the middle of a basketball court as the game's going on. And, you know, and there's a lot of technology that has to evolve for that to happen. But I will tell you the starting point, I've already seen it at Camp Nou, which is Barcelona Football Club's stadium here in Barcelona. The Universe did one of these walkthrough experiences. It's a 7-minute experience. You walk in, you're in the locker room, you open the lockers,
there you go.
Players, you see clips,
right?
And then you
the
go
clubhouse.
in, and then you fly over the stadium, and then you land in the stadium, and you're a miniature, and this player with a giant soccer ball kicks a ball over your head, and so these fan experiences bolted onto stadiums is where it's starting. And then I think the next stage of that will be immersive highlight clips of the last game or a previous game.
Tie that into the home
experience from
courtside. Then they got the entire 360 experience. You know, the clubhouse at home, the social aspect. You know, plus the third space location, which is the stadium. You know, and the merchant. Yeah, I hear you. I mean, these things. You know, again, ideas.
And there's a part B to this question, which is, you know, kind of different, which is Meta's collab with Ray-Ban and affecting XR momentum. And I kind of touched on this. I don't think it has. I'm not sure what it has to do with XR, to be honest.
It may retrograde the process because its production value is inverse to where this other stuff was going.
Look, I think it's getting people used to having tech in glasses. It's getting people used to wearing glasses that don't need glasses. And so will it help XR tech be adopted at the consumer level when it's ready? Maybe in AR glasses, but I don't classify those as AR glasses. I don't even classify them as XR tech. And I think what the XR community is doing is they're so desperate for a success story. They're pointing to Meta Ray-Bans and saying, it's XR, XR works.
And there's AI in it. There's AI and XR. It's got to work. But
AI is not XR. Will AI help enable XR? Will it be a part of it? Absolutely. But it's no more than Bitcoin was part, and NFTs were part of the metaverse. Like the
That's
NFT
right.
movement tried to co-opt the metaverse.
That's
It's the
right.
same
And
thing.
it
People
didn't
just
work.
get desperate for success,
It
and
didn't
that's what
work.
I think is happening.
I couldn't agree more. And it may become another painful lesson, like the Web3 metaverse slash, cryptocurrency lesson.
Look,
That took
Ray-Bans
2
are a
years.
blockbuster success, and I don't think the ones with the displays will be a success at all. I think that's
Right.
kind of more like an Apple Vision Pro, get your feet in the water, than it is something that's going to be a big consumer success.
Well, now it seems you mentioned Apple. I mean, now we may have to go into another waiting period. We don't know.
Look,
I mean, Apple's
you got to be
slowing
careful.
down with the
You got to be
Pro,
careful.
or
Dude, you got to be careful buying into rumors around Apple. Like those guys are really, they're playing a long game. They have a shit ton of money. They're making a shit ton of money. They've never been a reactionary company, ever. They've never
not really. No.
have they, look, the smart speaker thing, they've always been late to market.
Right.
They've been
Except for
successful
GUI.
more times than they're not
Right.
successful. But I don't see them as Snap. I don't see them as, Snap reactionary company. I just don't see a history there. So
No, but the concern is, of course, is that the press, the noise, the hype, the people go where Apple goes, because Apple has built that mythology around it, even though it's a mythology more than it is a reality, as you say.
yeah.
And again, what it does is it slows down. Again, when we're talking, we've already, I mean, things that you've seen and are reporting back on suggest that there's a real opportunity in this mixed reality type thing, in where the market is now and coming out of COVID and trying to find some new things to do. I mean, especially as this town, creative town, needs something to do,
Yeah.
and if we're going to decide that we have to wait another 4 years for Apple to get their act together, that's going to be murder.
Look, even the companies that were successful in VR gaming with Quest have now basically, like, Batman Arkham Asylum was a great game that
Right.
sold fuck all units. And
That's
so, and Ghostbusters, same thing, right? Like I like to joke that Jake Zim, and it's not a joke, but he's landed at a better place. Jake Zim at Sony got ghostbusted because he rested his career on that game for Sony. And it bombed, not because it was a bad game. It was because people just aren't paying $60 for VR games, and they're not paying $60 for anything in gaming anymore.
Sony, again, is another example. They point, but they never combine. Where was Sony Music during the entire VR revolution?
Yeah.
No.
Well, I don't know. Music's a whole other.
But again, it's integrating mediums. Let's see what we have here. Let's see. Can XR wearables, this is from Light Lou, can XR wearables like smart glasses and watches be integrated into immersive entertainment?
Yeah, look, I think you got to be really careful about the use case. And if you've got a really clear use case and an economic model behind it, and it's reliable, for LBE, I'd be really careful there. I don't know. I'm dubious about that. It's not.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's like, why build a whole platform for that? It doesn't make sense unless you're being paid to for some reason. But for the reality's sake, it may be a tough integration.
I'd be careful about integrating any consumer technology into an LBE experience. By the way, Quest is a nightmare. If you're building in this space, don't use Quest. If you do, I will publicly shame you when you fail, because I warned you.
What is your reasoning for that, to say that?
It's simple. You can't stop OTA updates. So you build something, and then next thing you know, there's a new firmware. You can't control it. You didn't know it. You couldn't test it. It breaks, and now you got a Saturday afternoon when you're busy and you can't use your fucking shit. It's horrible. Yes. The co-location doesn't keep tracking. They've never supported LBE as a market vertical. They haven't built any features for it. And just at PortAventura, the first one, the walkthrough, the hysteria was done in Quest. They struggled because they didn't fucking listen to me. Then they did the next one in Pico. They love it. Now they're re-engineering the meta one for Pico because it works. So use Pico, use HTC if you're building an LBE.
Because it gives you the flexibility and freedom to control your own destiny. which
And
you
look,
don't have.
Quest looks, it's a great piece of tech. Like
It
they're
is.
losing money with everyone they sell. The hand
I
tracking is best. The pass through is the best. It's the best kit. It doesn't work for LBE, period.
right. Okay. What else? Let's see. Anonymous attendee. We're starting to see this, and we touched on this with movie theaters like experiences and extending out screen canvases like the Sphere and the Domes. How do you see this new level of immersive experience and this third space trickling into the world of live events and festivals and concerts? Okay, festivals and concerts using domes, and then also, actually, that would be very interesting. Festivals and concerts for this type of technology. I mean, I guess you could gate off areas and create, almost like a Burning Man,
Yeah.
gated zone like this.
Look,
I don't know if Brent or anyone has done that yet.
Look, I think at Coachella, Coachella has an immersive technology group within them, and they push the envelope with mobile stuff. Eminem did an amazing set on the main stage, where you could like see fireworks and missiles going off and shit on your phone that was tied into the concert and the narrative of his
On the
set,
phone.
but then you got Jack White saying, don't you dare look at my concert through your phone. And so I
Right.
think this is where wearables really come in and
Well,
shine.
that's what we're talking about, is using these
But what
wearables
percentage
that
of
do
the
MR.
100,000 people in the crowd are going to have an XR wearable over the next 5 years versus have a mobile phone? And so I think the concert experience is tough to integrate the wearables into until there's a critical mass of users, because there's real cost involved in deploying it.
Right.
Could you do one that it works both on your phone and your glasses? Maybe that'll happen. I think the bigger experience is this high throughput, walkthrough experiences in a tent at a festival. And
Right.
actually, to that end, Tomorrowland, which is one of the biggest music festivals in Europe, did a large-scale walkthrough experience in Barcelona to promote their thing. And I did it. It was a half hour. It was called the Library of Tomorrow. And you go in, and it was a half-hour walkthrough experience where you go to the jungle, and the plants became drums and musical instruments, and you tap on them, and then you'd go into a library and pull out books, and you'd see concert
And this was
footage.
was this a full VR or
Full VR,
mixed?
full VR.
Full
It was
VR.
done by Universe, yeah. And so,
Okay.
and so we're seeing it as brand extension in some places. So I think that's interesting little drops at pebbles in the pond.
Right.
But yeah, I think again,
But as brand extension, it makes sense. I mean, this is exactly what I was looking at with the virtuality stuff 30 years ago. Is you put them into you bring a unit to a concert, to a festival, you set it up, and people get to play with it and experiment with it. But
Yeah.
it wasn't part of the concert, but it was part of the experience of the concert. For people to wait in line and do that. But you can see the mixed reality ones again being very interesting, because you get to see the outside world at the same time. You're still hearing the music. It's and the visual thing you're doing. Okay, it's just it's just you're right. It's a very interesting time, and the question about music and festivals, I think, is right on target. Here's a question from Doug Starfield. Okay,
Great name.
where are the affordable haptic capable VR gloves?
Haptics has, bHaptics has one. bhaptics.com, b-haptics.com. They've got a set that I use. They're like $100. They were reasonable. It just depends on how much haptics you want. Like the cheap ones are just going to be vibrating. If you want something that gives you a sense of, like, the Hapdex ones are $10,000 or something like that, and require a backpack to hydraulics.
I was going to say, a lot of those used to be backpack related. Are there any mobiles at this point?
Look, the bHaptics ones are easy to use. You can get them on their website. I think they're under $100, and
they're mobile,
and for gaming and stuff like that. It just
mobile.
depends on the use case, but affordability, I'd say bHaptics. I would look at what they're doing. They're probably the leader in that space right now.
Okay. And Light Lou again is what tools do you recommend for LBE?
Big question. What, like, Lou, give me a little bit more context around that question, because that's a big, there's a million ways I could answer that.
Right.
I've mentioned XRoam, xrome.com as a development platform for large scale free roam from Universe.
Right.
Unity, obviously, if you're doing mobile, headset VR, with
We mentioned
and
for the headsets, we talked about Pico.
the
You
other thing we
mentioned-
haven't touched on is Android XR and the new Qualcomm, the new
Right.
Google Muhan headset and what they're doing with Google, and I think that's going
Right.
to be.
Doesn't Samsung also have a new
Well, that's
training?
what I meant. Samsung and Google with Android XR, the Project Muhan
Right.
headset is coming out sometime, whenever. And it'll be interesting to see what they do. And look, something a lot. I'm not sure if you followed this, but Google acquired all the technology and patents from HTC to integrate into Android XR. It was $250 million acquisition. It was an acqui-hire. They acquired a bunch of engineers and all the IP, and it wasn't an exclusive license, but they did license it all. So HTC still retains the ownership of that stuff. But so we're going to see, hopefully they're going to take a lot of the HTC, that core technology that they've been developing over a decade and help them really catch up and possibly, leapfrog beyond what Meta is doing with a closed ecosystem.
Well,
and I do love the idea of an open XR ecosystem built
absolutely.
on Android with the tools from HTC. Like, not enough talk about that in our industry, about the promise that holds. I think that could be really
And then with
powerful.
someone like Samsung as a hardware company, I mean, everyone knows Samsung. It's not even a question of, this is a consumer electronic company.
Yeah.
And, and eventually they will hit a price point, that everybody is seduced by, so it could be, let's see, the follow-up to that question, for individual developers specifically looking to experiment, develop smaller project, indie developer, that was the question. So we talked about Unity, we talked about
I think Unity is probably the place to start. I would look at the X-Chrome platform if you're serious about it. I think that's something that makes it really easy to get in and develop on. There are costs associated with it, but they have a free trial, I think. And so I think you can get into a free trial of that platform and play around with it and see.
So yeah, I mean, it sounds like to me that some of these platform companies, like you said, don't reinvent the wheel. Find a platform out there, make contact with them, find them from your website, and have a conversation and say, look, we want to start building this thing, because they are a natural distribution for it. I mean, this is going back to the movie theater model of 100 years ago, where the movie theaters were the distributors, as opposed to, somebody being in the middle of the act as a distributor to the theater owners. And, it's just the it just seems to me that's a natural way to go in this place right now, and an easy conversation to have. But what I want to do is thank you, Bob. It was a great presentation. So I'll give you some superlatives right now. It was a wonderful, best ever presentation. It really was a great conversation and presentation. And again, we can continue it in the VR space. Let me quickly thank Fran and Joan and Abilene and the whole team, and Leonard doing the work behind us right here to get everything up and running.